This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. We have another great show for you, a terrific interview with a talented young comic. He has started off with some real challenges in life, but he turned that into professional comedy, and he's a very successful motivational speaker. Please welcome to the show, Mike Cotayo. Mike, welcome to the show. It's so great to be able to get a chance to chat with you. I've done a little research, and I know that you've had a very interesting life. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. You know, I love that you called me young because I'm in my mid-40s now, and my body doesn't feel so young anymore.
Well, trust me, for an old man like me, mid-40s is pretty good. So you've been doing some stand-up comedy. When did you start doing that?
I just was thinking about this. I stepped on stage first when I was 19 in 1995, and then did it as a hobby for a few years. And in 2002, I was diagnosed with HIV, and I quit my job and started pursuing stand-up like a job. Within 3 years, I was headlining. And so I love stand-up. And then I quit in 2007 and went back to being a therapist.
Well, what an interesting start, middle, and finish. We should probably explain to the audience that you've had a little bit of a unique life, that at a very young age, you dealt with traumatic brain injury, and that has given you some aspects of your life that are more challenging. Maybe you can share with the audience a quick recap of your early life.
Sure. So I was in a car accident when I was 18 months old, a drunk driving accident. Who gives the toddler the keys, right? That's
a drunk 18-month-old.
Oh, my God.
Driving.
We're Irish, so, start them early. But after the car accident, I'm such an idiot. After the car accident, I ended up in a coma for 2 weeks, a medically induced coma, and they didn't think I would survive. I lost the ability to talk and to walk, and then slowly regained everything. But it was a hard movement forward for everyone, I think. My poor mother was only 24 years old. And so I can't imagine being that young and going through something like having a child go through something like this.
Yeah, I think any parent, the idea of having an injured or disabled child is everybody's worst nightmare. And yet the parents that have challenged children are just saint-like. They find that deep patience and love to help them, their children, of course, through these challenges. It's what a wild way to start your life.
Yeah, and my parents were great. They were no holds barred. They put my bedroom on the second floor. Like, you're gonna have problems walking. You're gonna learn to negotiate those stairs, buddy.
Wow. Well, giving people with challenges obstacles helps them overcome them and helps them strengthen both physically and mentally, right?
I guess I just thought they didn't want me to come down for dinner. But,
Well, that might have been a motivation. Well, how does somebody turn a challenge like traumatic brain injury into comedy? What you said, you were 19, you kind of gave it a shot. Do you remember your first joke?
Oh God, I don't remember my first jokes, but I do remember I didn't pay attention when they put on the light. In comedy, they call it blowing the light, and I blew the light like a $3 hooker. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, It was a blue light, and I go, "Oh, look, a blue light special." Anyway, and I kept on talking.
Oh, that's so
Because I was
funny.
doing well.
We should explain to the audience, as a producer, all the comedy clubs have some sort of signal. At the Comedy Store, they put a light on a painting. Most of the clubs, like mine, had a little red light or something, and it's to tell a comic, hey, you got less than 5 minutes, get off the stage. And in your case, it was a blue light, and you just made a joke and moved on.
Yes. And then it started flashing like crazy.
Oh, that's hilarious.
It was a lot of fun, and I was so lucky to try it. And then I thought I was pursuing it full time, but I really wasn't. I was getting up on stage once or twice a week, and then I would let everything else fall to the side. And then in 2002, I was like, all right, I'm really going to do this. And I did like 330 shows in 1 year. I just kept on performing. So within that year, I grew tremendously.
Yeah, and that's a great advice to young people, that if you want to get into this art form seriously, you really have to commit and get the stage time. It's all about stage time, right, Mike?
Yeah, all about stage time and writing. Like you gotta write every day, even if it's just a silly one-liner. You gotta keep that part of your brain active.
Right, and as a comic with some physical and mental challenges due to the brain injury, obviously you had to use that in your act, I'm assuming.
Right.
So it kind of gave you a foundation for writing comedy.
Yeah, so it's funny, you asked before what made me do. When I was 7 years old, I realized, like, people really wanted to feel sorry for me. They really, like, that is in people, to feel sorry for someone who doesn't have it as good, because it makes you feel better about yourself. And when I was 7, I realized that. And I also realized if I made them laugh, they didn't feel sorry for me because I was funny. And so that was when I started to realize my sense of humor was my secret weapon.
I think that's fascinating, and I think it's so true that when you, all of us, just as human beings, have a certain level of empathy, and we see somebody that's gone through something like you, but there's other things through the military and through other illnesses and childhood diseases, we want to feel sorry for them. It's a natural human thing, but I think was interesting that early on you realized that by turning it into humor, you were putting yourself on the same level as whoever you're with, family, friends, or an audience, and that makes you now appear. You're just like everybody else, and what you're doing is pointing out and kind of making fun of what's obvious anyway.
And I think empathy and sympathy are really different. Like, empathy is I feel for you. Sympathy is I feel bad for you. So, like, those are two. That's how I look at it. Like, I don't want anyone to feel bad for me. I appreciate it if they feel for me, if they think, oh, God, that's got to be tough. But, am I allowed to be dirty on here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a podcast. You do what you just be you, Mike.
So one of my earliest jokes was, I'm disabled, and somebody was like, oh, you have a physical challenge. No, I don't. Physical challenge? You want physical challenge? Suck my dick. How's that for a physical challenge? Like, that was, that was one of my earliest jokes.
Yeah, that sounds like early comedy material, but
right.
Suck my dick can be something that would certainly get the attention of an audience.
It's not just for comedy. Who doesn't love that?
It has 2 points. Well, what's interesting is that you got into comedy and found your voice, your comedy voice, and became a headliner. Who in the industry did you look up to, or did you get a chance to work with that inspired you?
Oh my God. I got a chance to work with so many great people. I was just today, I was thinking about, after I left comedy for about 8 years, and I took a break. And I would perform during that break, but I didn't do it as a job. I just did it to release stress, to have fun. And I was lucky enough that a friend of mine asked me to shoot a web series where I would be Colin Quinn's wheelchair using stalker. So,
Oh, really?
so I got to work with Colin. He's a great guy. It was so much fun. Jessica Kirson is one of my favorite all-time comedians. And, I love Robin Williams. Richard Pryor. I describe myself as a cross between Mitch Hedberg and Richard Pryor, because when I go on stage, my energy is so high, but I'm kind of silly like Hedberg.
Yeah, Mitch Hedberg worked for me several times, and he definitely had a unique style and a different way of approaching comedy, but certainly not somebody that would be horrible to emulate. He was very successful.
He was so simple and so funny at the same time.
Well, you obviously had some successes. You did get a chance to do a pay-per-view comedy special called Crossing the Line. And then I heard that you were also awarded one of the top comedians of the Philadelphia Pride Comedy Festival. Those are two great opportunities.
Yeah, and that was, and like, even before I started stand-up, I started pursuing it as a job. I was lucky enough to win at the Apollo, which was incredible for me. So,
yeah, that's awesome. So you went from working with Colin Quinn to working the Apollo to being a top comic at the Philadelphia Pride Comedy Festival. It sounds like you had a decent little career going, Mike.
I did. It was a lot of fun. And, mental health kind of ruins everything. I was self-sabotaging early in my career just because I didn't feel like I deserved anything. So, like, I had this one time, I had the woman, Kirsten Ames, who was the comedy booker for the HBO Comedy Festival, called me and asked me to send her my tape because she wanted to consider me for the festival. I was on cloud nine, and I never sent my tape because I was so afraid of, well, what if she didn't like it or nothing was good enough? So I got frozen in fear. And that happened a lot to me in my career.
I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, because it is an issue that young comics or people that are interested in getting in the show business have, and that is that they're so, as you said, frozen in fear or just stage fright, whatever it is. They don't give themselves the opportunity to share who they are on stage and share some of their comedy, and it's kind of challenging and difficult to get through that. But it's the people that do that I think win, right? Because they do get that chance, win or lose. I mean, it's many people fail, and that's fine. We learn so much when we fail, but if you don't even try, you don't get that opportunity.
Exactly. And so you never know, right?
Well, I think being adding more challenges to your own career, as you said, kind of self-deflating your possibilities. How did you overcome that?
Lots of therapy.
Well, there's something that works.
So in 2007, I made a decision to leave stand-up. I was at the height of my success, I wasn't famous or anything, but I was on Opie and Anthony radio show promoting the Short Fest Comedy Tour, and Patrice O'Neill and Ralphie May were on there, and they absolutely loved me. And it made me feel amazing. And I found a real niche. Dead fat guys love me. So they were so encouraging and so great. And right around the time I was on, it was 2005, Ralphie May told me they just passed Josh Blue on Last Comic Standing, and I went, yeah, I know. Like it hurt me so much because we both have cerebral palsy. And he goes, you're a lot funnier than he is. And I took that and I just let it sit in me for a little bit, because that was such a nice thing to hear, because he had representation. I was coming up trying to do it all myself, you know? I think it's the difference between being a big fish in a small pond and a small fish in a big pond. Like I came up in New York. He came up in Colorado, I think.
I'm not sure, but boy, Ralphie May had a pretty interesting career. I mean, for somebody that had his own challenges, he had a lot of success, a lot of TV.
He did. And he was such a super nice guy.
Well, I think you make a good point that when you reach a certain level as a professional comic, you are absolutely correct. Some people try to self-manage, which there can be success there, and you do save yourself 10 or 15% of your income. But the true pros, the ones that start doing TV and in getting some of the bigger gigs, usually end up with representation. And Ralphie having that representation certainly helped his career.
Right.
So you're doing well, you're having a successful comedy career. You decided to pivot. What did you end up doing after comedy?
I went back to school to be a psychotherapist, and it wasn't really pivoting. It was more, I was having panic attacks every time I went on stage. Like I'd be ventilating in the corner right before they called me up, and then I would go up and be fine. But it was always the lead up that got me scared. And I remember the dialogue in my head became, why are you doing this? You're not any good. This is driving you nuts. You should quit. And then after about 5 months of that, I quit, because it's a lot to deal with that every night.
Yeah, you were kind of, as you mentioned earlier, self-defeating. You were putting yourself psychologically into a mental state that made it challenging, kind of like stage fright 2.0, right?
Exactly.
And then it's not fun. So then you decided to go into psychotherapy. I know that now in the last decade or so, you've become a very respected motivational speaker. Is that what came of your work in school?
Well, in a way, I mean, it helped prepare me to talk openly about things and not worry about what people would think. And, you know, my one concern is that how will what I say affect the people I love? Like, will it come back on them? And so I often have conversations with my wife where I say, if I talk about this, will you be okay with it? Like, and she's a trooper, man. She's like, go ahead. As long as you're getting paid, you could say whatever you want.
Well, women have a way of knowing what's important, which is having a little income.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Mike, I want to point out something that I'm sure you realize, but may not be obvious to everybody, that obviously your years in stand-up comedy helped formulate your success as a motivational speaker, right? Because you were comfortable with an audience, you knew how to use a microphone, you knew how to get the attention of a crowd, you knew how to kind of control a crowd from an artistic point of view. All those aspects of comedy must have helped you as a motivational speaker.
Definitely. It's one of the things that keeps us going is we have a skill set, a very unique skill set that we can dive into. And, you know, I love, more than telling my jokes, I love just talking to crowds. So being a motivational speaker is excellent, because you could go into a little bit of your speech, ask how people are doing, talk about how they're impacted, and kind of pivot on the spot.
Right. And I think that I'm just assuming, maybe you can explain, Mike, are you using comedy to help engage with those audiences as a motivational speaker?
Of course. Of course, like comedy is at the root of resilience, and so everything we say can be thought of as funny, or everything we go. I've been a drug addict. I was raped. I have HIV. Like, I've gone through so much shit, and I've never lost my sense of humor, and I think that's what kept me alive.
Well, also help make you a success. So even though you had some success as a stand-up comic, as a more mature adult, you go into motivational speaking and sharing through your education as a psychotherapist to engage with people and help them with their problems. You're using your history in comedy and your self-induced problems to really engage. And I think that when it comes to any sort of therapy, engaging with the individual or the audience is the key, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure. Totally.
And being able to use comedy, it just makes it so much easier, and you can go a little deeper because you can take those difficult subjects and put a little humor on them, right?
Oh, for sure. And I said the same thing when I was doing therapy. If you're talking with a person who's dealing with trauma, there's going to be a point where they edge out and they're like, I can't deal with this anymore. If you tell them a joke or laugh with them, they'll get right back into it.
Interesting.
So humor does so much. It helps regulate your emotions. It helps regulate your nervous system. It tells you you're okay. It's hard to laugh and be mad at the same time.
Oh, exactly. And I think that's so important to share. I'm assuming, but why don't you share with the audience, as a professional motivational speaker, you're available to be hired. What sort of topics do you share with audiences?
I will talk about whatever you need, but mostly what I talk about is resilience, knowing how to pivot when things go bad, what you can do to really change your perspective. Something bad can happen and you don't have to stay miserable. You can choose to look at the bright side. And I do that through a lot of different techniques. Like, there's an anger technique I use, which can really help someone to understand where that fear of change comes from and why we get stuck in patterns. I hope that's making sense. I feel like I went all over the place.
No. This is good information to share, but I know that one of your topics is dealing with difficult people. And I think that whether it's show business or just around the office, whatever your job, we always run into people that can be difficult to interact with. And it could be a personality conflict. It could be any number of things. You've been able to help people resolve that kind of feeling, or deal with that kind of conflict with people?
Of course. And it's mostly that you can't change other people, right? You can't change how they act. You can only change how you react. So if they're going through something, you can just sidestep them and deal with how you're going on with your day and leave them alone. Like, I had someone who was a newer comic who was trying to help, and then he lost it on me. He's like, "You suck. Your comedy isn't that funny." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure. You're right. Okay." And I aligned with him to kind of get him away from me. And so I'm like, "Sure, I understand what you're saying. I think totally." And
well, that's a great way to deflect anger, is to align with their thinking or just agree with them and move on. We've been going through a challenging time with my father-in-law, who is elderly and sometimes gets challenging just in his old age and his dementia.
Yeah.
And it is really best just to go, yeah, you're absolutely correct. Yes, you were just in Cleveland yesterday. Yes. which of course it wasn't, but you just agree with them to calm them down and deflate their anger, and then that allows you to move forward. So going back to comedy, you did do that for a number of years. Was there any particular stories or moments that were extra exciting or maybe challenging?
Within motivational speaking or within therapy?
Well, I was going back to your comedy days because
this is a
stand-up comedy show. But no, anything that you feel would be informational for the audience.
So, here's the thing. I don't believe in being politically correct. I don't think it has a place. It just shuts people down and it shuts people off. And so I don't feel like being politically correct is necessarily great for comedy, because we're all comedians now are afraid of being hit on stage or canceled or having bottles thrown at them. These are real problems. And I think for me, being a comedian, you have to turn your filter off, especially if you like doing crowd work. So I learned very early on how to turn my filter off. And I've said some very mean things on stage that I did not intend to say. And that is something like I constantly try to work on is I can say this and it'll get a laugh, but how will it make the other person feel? I'm not worried about being canceled. I'm fine with that. Like, I'll survive. I think I'm funny enough where it doesn't matter. But I do want to make sure I don't hurt other people's feelings, because I've done that and that doesn't feel good.
So you kind of spoke against yourself. You're saying you don't believe in the counterculture and the whole woke thing.
I don't.
But at the same time, you want to be aware as a comic or as a motivational speaker not to overreach and attack somebody. I did speak out of both sides of my ass, didn't I? Well, that's okay. It's a confusing world.
Here's the thing. I don't want to. I think people get too sensitive. So here's the incident that brought that idea up. So I was performing at the Laugh Factory around 2005, 2006. There was a woman in the audience who was engaged. She was getting married. I go, oh, great. When are you getting married? On Tuesday. I said, Tuesday? Who gets married on a Tuesday? Are you Jewish? And the audience started laughing, and I could see her face deflate. Like I took something that was supposed to be a happy moment for her, and I made it shitty. And so I've always kept that in the front of my mind. Like, it was funny. People still laugh when I say it. I think it's still funny, but I don't want to hurt someone individually. I don't care about talking about a culture. I don't care about saying stupid things on stage, but I don't want to hurt an individual's feelings.
Well, I think that's an important distinction. There is a difference between attacking or hurting somebody purposefully versus freedom of speech, where you have a right to state your opinion and not be concerned that some of the thin-skinned snowflakes in the audience aren't going to grab the pitchforks and torches, right? So when it comes now, so that's in comedy. As a motivational speaker where you're using some comedy, you're able to use your knowledge of psychotherapy and deflate situations. Right. So you're helping people manage their life without stepping on everybody else.
And in motivational speaking, the comedy bar is set so low. Like something that would get.
Well, that's funny though, Mike. It's true, but it's funny when you're in front of a paid comedy audience. You have to go for that 10 level laugh every time. Right. In motivational speaking, if you get a 0.4 giggle, you're still better than the other motivational speaker.
And a point for giggle feels like a 10 in a club. Like,
That's
thing
true.
Is the bar is set so low that you can't really do bad when you're doing motivational speaking unless you attack the audience. And why are you there if you're a motivational speaker? You're not. That's a demotivational speaker.
Right. You're kind of defeating the purpose. Well, Mike,
Right.
you've got some great insights, and I think it comes from your I know it started with traumatic brain injury, but really you've had a dramatic life with lots of ups and downs, and you've found a way to learn from that, educate yourself, and now you're sharing with others ways to avoid or deal with the challenges that life brings us. What's coming up for you in 2023 or 2024? What exciting projects, or what are you hoping to achieve in the next year or so?
In 2024, I'm looking to produce the first ever stand-up comedy festival. And so I'm starting to fundraise for that. I'm starting to look for venues. I'm starting to do all the things I have to make a national comedy festival. And so that's a lot of work, but it's really very exciting. One goal is to make this is a dream right now, but to make every club handicap accessible, because there are comics who are in wheelchairs who can't get on stage.
Yeah, not every, my clubs, actually, I had 3 of them, always had wheelchair accessibility, but it is rare in comedy. A lot of stages you have to jump up on, or they just have a couple stairs, and that does make it challenging. I think that's
you get a little person and you practice midget tossing. You just throw them on stage.
Well, right, and that's appropriate if that's their goal, is to get on stage, right? No, well, I think that's a great goal to have, Mike. That if you can pull off this festival, now will that be in Philadelphia? Is that still your home range?
No, Philly is. I'm a New Yorker, so I came up in New York. I grew up in New York. I started dating my wife in 2017, and I moved to Jersey in 2018. And so I'm still in Jersey, but the festival will probably start out in New York.
Well, I think you got a great audience there, and there's a lot of comics that have physical and mental challenges these days that are trying to get their story out, because it helps the rest of America that is dealing with those challenges laugh at their situation and overcome it, right? So if you can pull off this festival, it would be a huge success. I think that's a great goal, Mike.
And I'm hoping, I just sent a reel to America's Got Talent, and I'm hoping they accept me. And that way that platform will help elevate this festival.
Well, I think that sounds amazing, Mike. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Cotayo, a one-time challenged young person, both mentally and physically, who was able to become a professional and successful stand-up comic, is now a professional and successful motivational speaker. You've had such an interesting life, Mike. Thank you for sharing some of it with my audience today. How would people reach you if they wanted to help with this festival, or reach out on other ideas that you're working on?
Go to my Linktree. I have all my socials there. Linktree.com/funnymanmike. FUNNYMANMIKE.
funnymanmike.com is a website you have, and then you can contact you through the various social media. Well, Mike, I think that people will do that. Thank you so much for sharing your story and taking comedy and adding a little seriousness and yet wellness to it. I think that you've been able to do something special with your sense of humor by bringing a sense of wellness and mental strength to your audiences is so important. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me on, Scott. I really appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mike Cotayo. Be sure to reach out to him at www.funnymanmike.com. Mike, it's been a pleasure to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back next week with another great show. Thanks, Mike, for joining us.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.